Hey there, my name's Pete and I like pictures. We're in Lightroom again. Hooray, hooray. Long time no video. I'm sorry, but I'm currently working on a series of new videos that go beyond Lightroom. Actually, before Lightroom, because they will cover some basic things about digital photography, and I really hope those videos will be useful for some of you. But in this video, let's talk about one of those tabs in Lightroom that most people I know don't ever use, never touch, and that is the camera calibration tab. What does that do? It's a very interesting tab because you can do a lot of very interesting stuff with that. And let's take a look. We have the process, in that case 2012, the current process. We have profile, in that case Adobe Standard. We have some sliders for shadows, red primary, green primary, and blue primary. In shadows, we have the tint, in red, green, and blue primary. We have hue and saturation. But let's work this tab from the top to the bottom. What is the process? The process is basically how Lightroom treats your photos. And it's directly connected to the sliders in the basic tab. You have different sliders in the basic tab when you choose different processes. And I don't want to go too much into detail here because that has a lot to do also with what is a RAW file, what can you do with RAW files. Just in short, the current process. The most current process that you have in Lightroom will most definitely give you the best quality results or the highest quality results. I can show you, if we go to the 2003 process and we go to the basic tab, you see we have exposure, recovery, fill, light, blacks, brightness, contrast, clarity, vibrance, saturation. And if we update to the current process by clicking on that little flash here, and it asks me to either update all photos in the film strip or just update this one. Just update this one and take a look at the sliders here. When I update, they change. We now have exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. And clarity, vibrance, saturation stays the same. So we have different sliders. We can do different things with that. Of course, you can change to a more previous process if you want to do other things to your photo. So that just as an info. What is the process? It not only changes the sliders, it also changes the algorithms that work in the background. So processing your RAW file will definitely benefit from using a more current process, but you can not only change the process when you're working with RAW, but also when you're working with JPEG or any other file type. Other than process, the profile is only available when you actually have a RAW file. And you see I have a RAW file here, CR2 from my Canon 700D. And if we click on that, we see Adobe Standard is the default. So every RAW file that you import into Lightroom will be processed with the Adobe Standard profile, which will most of the time, that's how I feel it, and I was pretty much shocked when I imported my RAW files the first time into Lightroom because they didn't look at all like they looked on my display on the camera. Because what I see on my camera is, or on the display of my camera, is not the RAW file, because you cannot see RAW files. RAW files are just a pile of digital data. RAW files are not pictures. You have to process or develop a RAW file so that you can actually see a photo. And if you have, like me, a Canon DSLR, you can choose between camera faithful, landscape, neutral, portrait, standard. If you have a different camera, you have different profiles. And these profiles in Lightroom match, or, well, sort of match the picture profiles in your camera. So when you shoot with the landscape profile in your camera, the picture will pretty much look different than when you shoot with portrait, standard, neutral, faithful. And you can simulate that or emulate that in Lightroom. So this is a landscape shot. So I'm not really sure if I did that, to be very honest, because I use the faithful style very often, but landscape, we can just click through. Let's check what happens. If we click on faithful, you see the picture changes. And it also changes if we go to landscape. See, the blues are much stronger. Actually looks not that much of what I wanted to look. And if you go to neutral, it is more dull. If you go to portrait, it also pushes the colors a bit. And if you go to standard, it also is a bit dull. So if you want to look your pictures at least very similar to what you saw on your camera's display, then choose the profile that you used during shooting, because that profile file is applied in camera to that JPEG preview that you see on your display. Again, you don't see the raw file on your display, you see a JPEG preview where these profiles, or where this profile that you selected is already applied. And you can change that if you are working with a raw file. It's a good starting point. Most of the time I do, and I presume you do as well, you choose the picture style according to the scenery or the subject you're taking a picture of. And so that should be, at least how I see it, the first thing you do before you even start editing a photo, to choose the appropriate profile. Now, what's up with those color sliders? What do they do? That is something where you can really get creative. Because not every blue is the same, not every red is the same, or not every green is the same. So even though you might have a perfect representation of the blues, greens, and reds in your photo, you might want to have them a bit differently. For example, I go to landscape now. And for my taste, the blues are way, way, way too saturated. And so I go to blue primary and first change the hue. You see on the left it's more like in a greenish direction, and on the right it's more into magenta. So I can really set my blues in a way I like them. And of course the same goes for reds and greens. So you see, I can really fine-tune the colors the way I want them. And of course that also helps if you know that the colors of your camera are slightly off, so you can really set them to a value that fits, for example, a color chart that you shot before. And if you have set everything the way you want, you can create a preset. So for example, this is a landscape shot, and now this is how I like it. This is how it should look like in my personal view. And then you go to presets here and click on the little plus sign. And you can create a preset. Call it, for example, landscape. Can put it in user presets or any other folder, or even create a new folder. I uncheck all of these settings because I only want process version and calibration. Let's create a new folder. Let's call it calibration. Click on create and we create a new folder, and I forgot that I also had to click on create for the preset, so we'll do that. And check none, process version calibration. And I want it in the calibration tab and click on create. I had to create it, of course. I canceled it, just cancel it. So I have the landscape calibration here. So I can, if I go to my library and choose any other photo, like, well, let's take this one. Go to the develop module. I just click on landscape and you see how it changes. The shot is unedited, of course. You see, I would probably do a lot of things to that shot. So what if you want to apply that preset to all photos or to many photos? Simple. You just mark each and every one of these. I'll close that here. And right click on it, click on develop settings. If they are not here, you probably have to click on load settings. This somewhere now they are loaded, and just choose calibration and landscape. And so all of those photos will update. So this one's for today. Hope it was of any help. Bye. Till next time.